lovely people! I'm really excited about this week's video because I am doing a tag which has really inspired me.
Sophie Vlogs!
So, as you can probably tell from the title of the video, I am doing the best books you've never heard of tag. This tag was created by Danica Lee Ellis. I'm going to leave a link to her channel down below so you can check her out. It's based on a series of blog posts that she does, and if you are in any way interested in reading books that are focused on like female romances, I highly recommend you check out her channel. It is really brilliant. I'm going to go through the questions. I'm going to try and be fairly concise because I'm recording this and it is really hot currently. I've had to shut all the windows so that all the people who are frolicking outside in the sunshine don't disturb us. But I am feeling the warmth. So like, I'm going to try and be concise so that I can open all the windows again and like breathe. That's also the reason why I don't have any physical books to hold up in this, because I thought that's extra faff. But as per usual, I will include a list below which has all the books I'm talking about in case you want to check any of them out. Okay, so question number 1 is, are there many books that you've read that are below 250 ratings? And then it says below 100, any under 25, any under 10. It was when looking into this that it made me really want to record this video, because I realised what books I have read that have very few ratings. The way you can work this out is if you use Goodreads, you can view all of your read books and you can order them so that they're listed via number of ratings given, and that's how you can tell. So, under 250 books, I have 131 books. Under 100 books, I have 14 books. And then really interestingly, under 10 books, I have 11 books. So you go from like 250, quite a few of those, and then it's like the difference between under 100 ratings and under 10 ratings is like 3 books out of all the ones I've read. So that was interesting. Question number 2 is, how did you hear about the most obscure books you read? I think part of how I've ended up picking up most of these books is a cross between people who I know in real life lending them to me, and then I have a tendency, a lot of my book buying is through second-hand bookshops, so I tend to impulse buy a lot of books that just seem interesting to me, and quite a few of the ones that have ended up being on this list of lower number of ratings are ones that I have impulse bought from like obscure little second-hand bookshops. I think my boyfriend is a great source of these when I was looking at them, because he reads a lot of non-fiction. He has very particular areas that interest him, which are a little bit niche, and a number of the books that were on this list of lower rating books were books that he has lent me because of his obscure, like, historical interests. So that was really interesting. And I think that is also part of this, a number of these books that came up while I was doing this. I'm not sure I would say that they are actually obscure, unknown books, but I would posit that I think the audience and readership who are reading them are not people who use Goodreads. So I think there are a number of books which I might be mentioning in this video which are actually read a lot and sell a lot and blah blah. It's just the people who read them don't use Goodreads to organise their reading. So that's just something to also bear in mind, I think. Question number 3 is the bit where I'm going to go on a bit, because it's, what are some of your favourite unknown, under 250 ratings, books that you've read, and why should more people read them? This is really hard. Essentially, when I was doing the research for this, I realised that I think I might want to do 1 or 2 videos myself, which are books you've never heard of, and then maybe do them by theme, because I think there are quite a few that could go nicely together in little book videos. If that's something you'd be interested in, do let me know, because I've been sort of thinking about what books I could group together that might like thematically link. Some particular highlights include, on a queer history front, Good As You by Paul Flynn, which has 83 ratings on Goodreads, is a really interesting look at specifically gay men from about like the 70s, 80s onwards in pop culture. So it looks at music, it looks at television, it looks at film, and it looks at sport and stuff like this. And it's a really interesting look at pop culture. And for example, there was a chapter in it which is all about Big Brother, which and it talks about how Big Brother, one of the early seasons, one of the contestants on it was a gay man, and his presence on that TV show has a profound impact on how we as a collective country viewed and talked about gay men. And interesting things like this that I'd never considered before, like angles on, you know, there are obvious narratives about, like, people like George Michael who were big, who were very famously came out and stuff like this, but then, and then those other angles that I hadn't considered, like the importance of Big Brother and like homosexuality in sport, how different sports have responded to that, like football versus rugby, that sort of thing. So that was really interesting. The Wild Folk by Sylvia Linsteadt is a really lovely middle grade children's book that it follows two children, one from the countryside, one from the city. They are each have a hare as a companion, and the hares are siblings, and it's this really wonderful magical adventure which is at its heart a reminder to treasure the world and treasure nature and work to save nature. And it does this lovely melding of being a really enjoyable children's fantasy and then also being rooted in a love for the world. The second book is going to come out at some point and I want to get my hands on, but that was a really lovely middle grade book. A YA book I would recommend is When We Speak of Nothing by Olumide Popoola, which I'll be talking about in a book chat wrap-up that's coming out at some point in the future. But it looks at two different teenagers growing up in London around 2012. They've grown up like brothers. One of them is trans, ends up going to Nigeria to meet his father and becomes involved in like eco-activists over there. The other one is in London during the London riots, and these two stories are both exploring very interesting themes to do with those things. And then at its heart, it is about the bond that ties these two boys together and the brotherhood that ties them together and the testing of that and if that bond will survive. It was a really enjoyable sort of stream of consciousness narration, and I just thought it was really great. The final book I'm going to talk about is an adult urban fantasy book, and that's Bold as Love by Gwyneth Jones. It's sort of a rock and roll Arthurian retelling. It's some heavy trigger warnings I would include is stuff like sexual assault, rape, drug use, stuff like that. It is very, explores some heavy topics. It's got elements of fantasy and magic to it. It's essentially about this counterculture revolution and this group of rock stars that are thrown together that are supposed to try and help shape the world and stuff. It is, I have never finished this series. I think I've read 3 books from the series, and I really like the first 2. I don't remember the third book very well, but I think the first 2 books have some really interesting ideas, and I just think it's an interesting Welsh urban fantasy book that I don't think I've ever met anyone else who's read. But yes, that's a handful of books. I've held a lot of books back because I think what I'm going to do is do some videos on topic, particularly non-fiction history. I might do one that's to do more like art history, that sort of thing. If those are things that you'd be interested in, do leave me a comment to let me know so that I actually get around to doing that promptly. Question 4 is any other thoughts? And it's given some prompts. Some of the prompts include, do you think the most popular books you've read are usually better than the least popular ones? And my answer to that would be that going through and making this list, I realised that some of the books that I have read in the last few years that have been most exciting to me have been these books that do not have a lot of ratings. That said, I have also read a number of books which have been very hyped, which have got a lot of ratings, which have been equally as delightful to me. So I think it's less a sense of, do I think that lesser rated books are better than higher rated books? And I think it's more a sense of, I think it's important to know your taste and to be willing to step out of your comfort zone and read something that you might not have heard a lot of people talking about. But equally, there's nothing wrong with reading things that lots of people are talking about. Lots of people are talking about them for a very valid reason, because they're good. That said, I've definitely read some books recently because of hype, which I've not enjoyed so much. For example, perfectly fine book, don't think it's a bad book, but I recently read Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, and I thought it was fine. Contrast that with the 5 books I've just talked about. I'm infinitely more excited about talking about those than I would be about Shadow and Bone. That's not a critique of people who do like Shadow and Bone. That's just, I know my taste in books. That one didn't really do it for me. That's fine. The second question here is, why do you think your least read books are so unknown? And again, I think that's what I mentioned earlier. I think some of them are less well known because they're very niche, and I'm going to go a little bit more into niche topics when I do these follow-up recommendation videos. But yeah, some of these are just very niche, exploring particular areas that maybe you need some back knowledge to know about, or just like they're from smaller printing presses, they didn't get as much promotion, that sort of thing. The follow-up question is, do you like reading unknown books or popular books better? I think I kind of answered that earlier, but essentially I like reading books that entice me better, and sometimes those are well known and sometimes those are not well known. And then finally, do you want to read more obscure books? Yes, always, because I think there is something exciting about reading obscure books. It's just harder then to find the people that you can talk to about them. Sometimes with the more obscure books that I'm really passionate about, it's why I like making videos, because I can put videos out. And some books which I've never met anyone in person who has read them, I have had comments on my YouTube videos by people who've read them, and that's been really exciting. So my downside to reading obscure books is the lack of people to talk to about them. The upside is that when you do find someone who's read them, that is particularly exciting. Question 5 is, who do you tag? I'm going to tag some people who always introduce interesting books to me. So I'm going to tag Sylvia, I'm going to tag Elizabeth at Bookish North, I'm going to tag Matthew at NCS Books. I'm going to leave it there because I'm on the spot and I panicked and I've done it off the top of my head. If you are interested in doing these tags, though, do let me know when you've posted it, because I would love to watch it, because I'm always looking for more obscure book recs. I will hopefully follow this up with an obscure book recs video at some point. History, art history, maybe some middle grade, stuff like that. Let me know what sort of a topic you'd like me to prioritize with that, and I'll go through those 131 books and sort of try and work them out into some video ideas, I think. That's it for me for now. I just got really overexcited about this tag idea. As per usual, do leave me comments down below if any thoughts you have. I would love to hear them. Otherwise, I will see you next week for something different.